Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for watching this video that I prepared. My name is Scott Benedict, and I'm the director of the Center for Retailing Studies at Texas A&M University. I'm speaking to you today from my office on the campus of the university in College Station, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to share with you a presentation that I had prepared for RetailX a few weeks ago, and unfortunately wasn't able to deliver. You see, earlier in the summer, I actually had a little bit of an accident and injured my right leg in a way that required surgery. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it to Chicago, despite having prepared this presentation on a topic I'm very, very passionate about, and just couldn't quite talk my doctor into allowing me to come. So when I heard about this opportunity to have a RetailX replay event, I jumped at the opportunity to be able to record this presentation that I had intended to give and share it with all of you, and I hope that you will enjoy it. So, purpose of my presentation was really to talk about the development of the next generation of leaders for retail organizations, retail enterprises. And normally when you speak at an event like RetailX, the first thing you do in the first couple of slides is to talk about you, your background, the organization that you represent, and what that organization does. And I'm going to do all those things here in just a minute. To kind of set up the conversation today, I want to talk to those of you who have been around retail, both physical and digital retail, for a number of years. And I mentioned some of you might remember a company called Service Merchandise. In fact, I used to work for Service Merchandise. If you're not familiar with them, a few fast facts about the company. They were once the leading catalog retailer, so they operated both physical stores, like the one you see in the picture there, and produced a biannual catalog out to their customer base every year. The time I was with them in the mid-1990s, they did over $4 billion a year in revenue, had over 400 stores across the country. And my time there as a buyer was between 1994 and 1997, so right in the middle parts of the decade. And about that time, online commerce was still very much an emerging idea. It was a new thing that most people were just beginning to hear about, both in the industry and consumers as well. It was during this time that Amazon and others were just beginning as startups. And as a buyer, and I was involved in the technology sector, I bought computers and home office products and things of that nature. I was really intrigued by this new emerging format of retail that was starting to take shape, and beginning to wonder how I could become involved in that. Well, about 1997, I got a phone call, and I was speaking to a recruiter from what was then called Walmart Online. It was the beginning entity, beginning foray, if you will, for Walmart into the online space. And the team that operated what was then called Walmart Online was less than 15 people. It had practically no real sales volume. I think the best year we did back then was maybe $2 to $3 million for the entire year. And one of the most interesting features of that first Walmart website was that among the interesting items we sold were live Maine lobsters. Yes, you could order a lobster, have it shipped in dry ice to your home, and then it would find its way, obviously, into a boiling pot of hot water, and would become a very high-end, wonderful meal for you. So when I get this opportunity to go and work with this, what is essentially a startup organization, I give my 2 weeks notice to Service Merchandise, and I immediately get called into the CEO's office. to explain why not only I, but my wife, who is also a buyer of service merchandise, were leaving the company to go and work for Walmart. And I explained to the CEO why I was intrigued by this new thing called e-commerce or digital retailing or whatever name it was known by at the time. And he sat and he listened while I explained all the reasons for wanting to go take on this new challenge. But at the end of my explanation, he made a comment that has stuck with me to this day. He said, this e-commerce thing is just a fad, right, Scott? It's not going to last. It's just a fad. Well, as we all know, that didn't turn out exactly to be true. And in fact, service merchandise a few years later would end up in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. All of its stores would close. And today, ironically, it lives on at servicemerchandise.com. It is an e-commerce only organization, almost as if someone could have foreseen that back then. So that was kind of interesting, but it was a great time to go to Walmart because Walmart was really interested in learning about this new business format, this new venture, and wanted to invest a little bit of time and effort and money into learning about it and being present in the space. And I was excited, as you can imagine, to join that organization, be with it through its early years, and to see it ultimately become one of the largest e-commerce sites in the world. Now, as far as introducing myself, as I mentioned at the top, I'm the leader of the Center for Retailing Studies here at Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Prior to coming here a few years ago, I spent more than 35 years of my professional life in retailing in a number of different roles. My own career journey has contained both physical and digital retail timeframes, if you will. And having that experience has really afforded me kind of a unique set of skills, perspectives, and experiences that I'm very thankful that I have, because I've gotten to see not only the rise and the advent of digital retailing, but now in the more recent years, we're starting to see how digital and physical retail work together to serve a consumer. And that fact, that transition, that evolution, if you will, is really at the core of what I'd hope to talk about today. My own transition from industry, from being a retail merchant to academia, has afforded me an opportunity to kind of see this transformation unfold. And it's caused me to develop a little bit of a passion for the topic that I wanted to share with you today. So with that, let me talk now a little bit about us, about the Center for Retailing Studies we have here at Texas A&M. So our existence dates back to the early 1980s, so 1983 to be specific. And our retailing program here at Texas A&M was a result of a challenge that came from a Texas-based retailer and their CEO, Mr. Donald Zale, who was at the time the leader of the Zales jewelry chain, observed in the early 80s that retailing was becoming a more complex business. I always kind of smile when I share that story, because even though Mr. Zale said that in the early 1980s, he could have just as easily have said it last week. And in both cases, those facts would obviously be true. But he challenged 3 business schools in Texas to invest in retailing education because he saw the need for university educated leaders in his own business, and believing that retailing was becoming more complex, he felt like university educated leaders was something that retailing was really called for. So Texas A&M was one of those schools that took up Mr. Zale's challenge. We founded the Center for Retailing Studies in 1983, and we were the first university in the country at the time to have a retailing education program. So with that as background as to why not only I as an individual or as a professional, but we as an academic institution have a real passion for this topic of how retailing talent will evolve in the future. That hopefully gives you a little background as to why it is that we think that way. Now, flip over from the early 1980s now to today. And one of the things that we see as we look across the retail landscape is that to some degree, functional teams within a retailing enterprise, particularly if that's an enterprise that has both physical and digital components to it, still remain somewhat siloed. And to some degree, there's still a digital team over here and a physical brick and mortar team over here. In some cases, they may not be in the same office building. In some cases, they may not even be in the same state. They may be located in another part of the country. This is really a legacy of how digital retail began within existing brick and mortar organizations like Walmart, where I was in the early days of e-commerce. And it was an attempt to not only preserve focus on the existing brick and mortar business that was still the majority of the sales back then, but it also allowed the digital side of the business to kind of grow up and prosper and evolve in a way that wasn't challenged by any legacy elements of the main part of the business. It allowed it to grow and prosper naturally. So skill specialization became a little bit of the norm. In other words, people who did particular functions on the digital side of the business were solely focused on the digital side of the business and didn't really have a thorough understanding of the legacy brick and mortar side of retail. And the same was true in the other direction. The people that were involved in the brick and mortar side of the business didn't understand digital and really, to some degree, viewed it as a fad, as we've heard some leaders have done in the past. And so this kind of siloed approach to running a retail enterprise really was the order of the day for about the first 20 to 25 years that digital retailing was growing up and becoming a factor in the retail business that it is today. What we're seeing now, and this was accelerated by the pandemic, is that approach is giving way to a more integrated omnichannel vision and approach for running a retail enterprise, serving a customer wherever, whenever, and however they wish to be served. And we're seeing a number of prominent retailers, from Walmart to Target, from Sam's Club to Nordstrom's, and a number of consumer brands as well, start to take these siloed, separated teams and integrate them into a single business-focused, customer-focused organization. And that sounds like a really great idea, and it is, and it's overdue, but it's not always easy. And taking people who effectively speak a different language and getting them all together on one team isn't always the easiest thing to do, because you have to do what we talk about here on this slide. You have to integrate skills across legacy and digital retail, help people who grew up on one side of the organization or the other understand the other part of the business, the part they're not involved in, and have that lead to a more holistic understanding of the business across channels. In other words, not running the digital and the physical business as if they were two different companies that shared the same logo, but that they were an integrated business. This focus was on driving results, serving a customer, and continuing to evolve and grow and improve the business over time. Now, our belief is that if that's in fact how retail is evolving, and we feel pretty strongly that it is, that there's a focus that those of us in academia have to really take on, which is what skills, what capabilities, what does the next generation of leaders of retail, whether they work for a retail enterprise or for a consumer brand, What do they look like? And instead of having this concept of specialization rule today, where you're just a digital person or you're a brick and mortar person, now whatever role that you play in a retail enterprise or in a consumer brand, you understand all the elements of the business, all the elements of how you serve a customer, and you've got at least a working knowledge of other areas of the business, even though you may be an expert or a specialist in one aspect of that business. So how do we migrate from this siloed approach of how to run a retail business or a consumer brand in the late 1990s and the early 2000s to where the consumer is most definitely taking us now? And I would argue that that journey begins first with knowing what not to change. In other words, what skill sets in running a retail business are evergreen that remain relevant, well, not only today, but in the future as well. And how do concepts like digital merchandising and digital marketing integrate into the skills that are required to run an omnichannel business, a unified commerce platform? And as part of that journey, we believe that there'll be a new definition of what retail business acumen, what a leader should know how to do and how to manage this more integrated retail business as we go forward. One of the first areas that we believe is critical that continues from legacy retail is this function within the merchandising team of planning and controlling merchandise purchases. Before a season, before a new fiscal year, merchants prepare buy plans. How much and how many of this item in this category and this brand are we planning to purchase and sell over this period that we're planning into the future, this next season, this next year? Getting down to individual item and then category decisions and forecasting which categories are growing, which are declining, which are kind of maintaining and are a little bit more evergreen in their nature, perhaps have seasonal ups and downs, but they continue on over the period of time. Those kind of decisions will remain important in retail moving forward, we believe. Assortment planning, making the decisions based on input from a lot of different sources as to what items to carry, what categories to grow, what brands are important, what materials, what consumer needs are you trying to fill with your assortment. All of those things, which are very much legacy components of retail, we believe will continue to be important in the future, as is managing inventory flow. In stocks, or in some cases out of stocks, are just as bad in a digital retail setting as they are in a physical retail store. An empty shelf is an empty shelf, and it's a missed opportunity to serve a customer and to drive the business result. So flowing your inventory, planning when inventory needs to arrive so that you can have it available for your customer, that's a legacy component of retail that we believe will continue into the future, as will product lifecycle management, knowing when a category or an individual product has begun its life, has begun to grow, has kind of leveled off, and perhaps when it's past the point of being desirable to a customer, and you should really get out of it and move on and reinvest your space, your dollars, and your time and effort in another product category. These are all elements of legacy retail that we maintain do not change as we become more digital. We also look at the inputs, the data that retail merchants use to make decisions, whether that be market or industry data that says this category of merchandise is growing and this is who tends to buy it, and here's how they tend to want to buy it. This category is really growing online. This category is already large online, but its growth trajectory has started to level off. These are all decisions that external data and internal data within a retail enterprise tend to inform, but they have to be thoughtfully utilized in order to drive decision makings, to drive investment decisions, both financial, time, space, in a retail business. And once again, we maintain that these elements of retail aren't going to change. We still teach these skills, these concepts to our students here at the center, and we will continue to do so looking into the future. Merchants also have to look at macroeconomic factors, what's going on in either the economy and the world overall, say, for example, a pandemic that has impacted all of our lives and all of our businesses in so many ways, or growth in new housing starts, growth in new automobile purchases versus keeping an older vehicle. Those are just examples from certain industries, but they drive decisions that retail merchants make. And once again, those are agnostic of whether it is a physical retail business or a digital retail business. The process by which also merchants find neat new products, source new products, find new suppliers, also we maintain isn't necessarily going to change and will remain relevant well into the future. So merchants will need to go to trade shows to meet new suppliers and find great new products. They may still have to go on trips to foreign markets or even other parts of our own country to find new sources of supply and where the latest innovation is happening from new product development. Not only are they in a journey to find great new items, but to evaluate new suppliers, new sources of supply. Can that supplier, no matter how wonderful a product that they may have, serve the needs of my business and my customer? Can they build enough of them? Can they build them when we need them? Can they get them to us safely? And are they made through proper methods, ethical sourcing, sourcing of products that are produced in ethical ways is also a concern to a modern retail merchant. And then some of the fundamental basics, negotiating pricing and terms. How quickly are we going to pay for those items? Are you paying to ship them to me, or am I paying to have them shipped to my facilities? Those are all what we call evergreen skills that we teach our students today. We've taught them for a number of years and will continue to teach them because we believe that they remain very, very relevant. Now, there may be a few skeptics out there. If you grew up in retail on the digital side of business, you may say, well, oh, Scott, that's very, very old school. None of those things really are relevant in a modern retail business. And I would, of course, disagree with you. And here's why. Lacking those legacy retail skill sets mean that you have leaders in your organization who don't always make the best financial decisions. They don't get behind categories that were growing and pull back from categories that maybe are declining or somehow challenged. Beyond those big macro decisions, there's also individual product decisions that also can be made and made poorly. This example I have here in the image that you see on the screen of these products that were very, very hot a few years ago. And I don't mean to try and be funny when I say hot. In this case, these hoverboards had battery issues that caused them to catch on fire. In many cases, it was because they were rushed to market. They were a hot fad, a hot commodity, particularly during a Christmas season a few years ago. In some cases, merchants didn't do the due diligence that they needed to make sure that this product was safe, that it had been tested. All the things that we, again, teach buyers to do, teach merchants to do, weren't done. and there was some pretty bad results that came of that lack of diligence. Investing in declining categories obviously is a problem whether you have a digital or a physical business. And so making sure you're making the right decisions, making sure you make decisions about what products to carry and whom to buy them from that not only meet legal guidelines and ethical guidelines, but also keep you in compliance with both federal and state and local laws is also important, as are the fact that if you don't invest in some of these legacy skills, the things that we talked about in the last few slides, you're likely going to miss some profit opportunities because your team is not led by individuals who understand some of these core elements of retail. So point being, up until now, is there are a number of elements of traditional retail education that we maintain will carry on into the digital future. But now let's talk about that digital future and some of the skill sets that we see emerging today as critical that we're adding to our curriculum and to our learning outcomes to make sure that students not only understand these legacy elements of retail that we've been talking about, but now understand where retail is going. Conversion rate optimization and the components of the conversion funnel, from driving traffic onto your website or onto your app and getting them to the product that they're interested in finding, and hopefully getting them to buy or click a buy button, is a pretty critical component of digital merchandising skill sets. Turning browsers into buyers, website visitors into buyers is all key elements of conversion rate optimization. Not only are they important from a merchandising perspective, but from a marketing perspective as well. Do you get return on your marketing spend that is in line with best practice is going to be just as important in a digital setting as it is in a physical retail setting. But the growth of digital merchandising has now added some new KPIs to our vernacular in retail. So things like add to cart rate, bounce rate of the people who visit my website, how many leave at some point during their journey without making a purchase or even seriously considering a product. All of those are elements of where digital merchandising skill sets now become very, very critical to success, and important that universities like ours add those skills to their curriculum. Beyond some of these basic conversion rate optimization activities, the digital shelf, a term that I love that describes how products are presented in a digital setting instead of on a physical shelf in a physical store, have a lot of important elements or components to it as well. Item level content, the depiction of an individual item, imagery, descriptions, how that product is viewed both in its box and maybe when it's being used, when it's assembled. All of those things are absolutely critical to success in a digital merchandising setting, even if that digital merchandising scenario or experience is one intended to drive the consumer into a physical store to make the final purchase. Becoming aware, sharing that item, having that item appear in the consumer's consideration set takes on very important meanings in the digital setting, just like it did in a physical store. The taxonomy structure of your website is also very important to discovery, finding a product, using faceted navigation to help a user narrow down their consideration set of items or brands or categories to get at the right group of items or individual item that you really want them to consider that meets their needs is very important. How you utilize user-generated content, not just as a way to drive a conversion today, but as an incredible source of information back to a merchant, back to a consumer brand that helps them continue to improve and refine a product or its packaging or how it's put together in ways that used to cost a tremendous amount of money. And now that data is right there for the retailer and for the brand to use. Getting the full value out of that is also a critical digital merchandising skill set in our view. How you use dynamic personalization technology to help show a consumer items that based on their browse and buy behavior is more likely to be the types of items, the types of categories that they really are interested in and could enjoy. That's also a critical component of digital merchandising in our view. Once all those things have been brought to bear and used effectively, retail merchandising is really about driving to the buy button, getting a consumer to put that item into their digital shopping cart and check out and either have it shipped to their home or have it made ready to pick up at a local store. And show skills like understanding shopping cart abandonment, which is really something that to this day, even though digital merchandising is no longer new, still leaves billions of dollars of potential sales out there that great merchants find a way to convert that abandoned cart into a sale. Using A/B testing, much the way that physical retailers use different display methodologies from one store to another store to test consumer acceptance of certain things. A/B testing is the digital version of doing just that, trying different consumer experience scenarios, purchase paths, and arriving at which one is the most successful and easiest for a consumer to use. That's a critical skill set. The use of web analytics to analyze, assess, and refine how a product, a category, a brand is depicted is also a skill set that we believe now becomes mainstream and necessary for success in retail. Overall, just using data-driven, data-informed decisions to drive merchandising activity rather than opinions or your boss's perspective. Those are things that, again, we believe are now becoming mainstream elements of a successful digital enterprise and skills that we intend to teach to our students here at Texas A&M. So you take the legacy of physical retail, bring it together with digital retail merchandising, and then you've got some elements of the retail experience that are what I call unified commerce, bringing all the pieces together to serve a consumer. And in retailing, whether it's digital or physical retailing, we do love our acronyms. So BOPIS, for I think most people know, is buy online, pick up in store. Our friends at Forrester Research continue to tell us that buying online and then picking up in a physical store continues to grow, particularly in categories such as grocery that were what we'll call late bloomers. They weren't part of the early days of online shopping, but they've certainly become mainstream here in the last few years. Not only the ability to manage an online sale that's picked up in a physical store, but also taking product returns in store that may have been purchases that were made online and making that an easy process for a consumer. We believe that's also becoming mainstream. Digital influence, where a digital experience may not directly drive a sale, but may inform a consumer in a way that, again, causes them to walk into a physical store to make a purchase. Just being able to research, is this product available at my local store, and how much is it, and when will that store be open? How do I go about making a purchase? Those are elements of digital influence that the merchants of tomorrow will definitely need to know. How digital marketers use loyalty programs that are enabled by digital experience, and digital marketing tactics, whether that's social media or email or other channels to drive traffic, to drive consumers into a retail business. All of those things are clearly evolving and changing, and our curriculum and how we prepare the next generation of retail leaders has to evolve right along with it. So let me just for a moment surmise that I've made my argument, I've made my presentation in a way that you agree. And you say, you're right, Scott. All this is coming together. And while we as an industry really need to evolve and change, you may be prompted to ask what I put there on the top of the screen. Now what? Now what do we do? Here's how I'd answer that question. First of all, preparing the next generation of leaders of retail, in my view, is a partnership between industry and academia. We have to work together to decide on what are those skills, capabilities that the business requires in the future, and to make sure that those things get integrated into our academic curriculum and part of the learning experience for our students today, so that when they take on leadership roles within your organization, they're prepared. Internships and entry-level roles that maybe give young people more diverse exposure to different elements of a retail business, not just the brick and mortar or not just the digital side. Career ladders, a way of developing your bench strength in such a way that they aren't lucky like I was and spend part of their career in digital and part of it in more traditional legacy retail, but that the development of talent now kind of weaves your way through a lot of different areas of an organization so that future leaders are more well-rounded. And doing this ahead of when the need is. The reference I make there on the slide to dig a well before you're thirsty is really intended to say you can't wait until that's a challenge or an opportunity in your business to start to make those investments in talent development. You've really got to make them right now. I will tell you, having been a retailer and now in academia, there aren't to this day really no textbooks that teach digital merchandising. Our course is having to be developed internally with partnership from a lot of different organizations across digital retail to help us build those learning resources. There are even fewer undergraduate courses or degrees in digital merchandising, and those should become more prominent and more readily available and promoted to young people considering different retailing careers as an exciting potential path to go down. And we really ask the retail community to become involved, to really come speak at universities like ours, be a guest speaker, be a guest lecturer, be involved in teaching the next generation and sharing your expertise with them as they are considering what paths they want to go down in their retail career. So we view really this as a partnership between those of us in academia and those of you in the retail community in creating, preparing, and fostering this next generation of retail talent that will serve our industry for decades to come. So let me kind of pull all this together because we talked about a whole lot of things today and kind of boil it down to a few key takeaways. First of all, the question I believe all of us involved in retailing need to ask ourselves is what skills will the class of 2025, those freshmen that are arriving on campus this month, what will they need to be successful when they enter the workforce? We believe that the industry will need merchants, marketers, supply chain leaders, all educated in unified commerce, retail activity that has both digital and traditional brick and mortar elements to it. And as we say, will need, the fact is the industry needs them now. So in other words, we all need to have a sense of urgency on this topic. Functional expertise in a particular area of the business versus a working knowledge of an omni-channel business from across all of the industry, both are important to foster and cultivate Yes, you may be an expert in this element of retail or that element of your company's business, and that's great, but you have to at least understand the other pieces and how it all fits together to be a leader of retail in the future, we believe. And we believe the time to start on this journey of preparing the next generation of retail leaders is, quite frankly, right now, which is part of why I was so excited to have the opportunity to speak to everyone at RetailX, why I really regretted not being able to be there in person. And so thankful for this, what is effectively a second chance to share these thoughts with you. So if I've done my job well, and you start to see things as we do, that it's important to prepare the next generation of retail leaders, we'd like to invite you to partner with us, to work with us, inspiring the future of retail. That's our marketing tagline here at the Center for Retailing Studies. And we chose it obviously with great thought, that that's really the role, the mission, if you will, of what we are on. You can reach us by phone, by email, you can follow us on social media, or you can visit our website. However you want to, we'd love to work with you. We'd love to work with enterprises from across the retail ecosystem, from across the retail landscape, to work on their piece, their part of how the industry is evolving and how we can work together to prepare the next generation of leaders for our industry. We'll hope you'll join us. I appreciate your time and listening to this topic. I thank you on behalf of everyone here at Texas A&M and the Mays Business School, and more specifically at the Center for Retailing Studies. Thank you and have a great day.